Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hassan, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself now?
I'm doing great as well. So, kind of a weird situation here where we are recording this in 2024, and this is going to be posted in 2025. So, it is New Year's Eve, the time of recording this one. Typically, we use this day to record our Thursday night show, but since there are no longer any more Thursday night games, we decided to make it a Saturday night special because there are two Saturday games will determine the AFC North and probably most of the postseason picture as the Browns will take on the Ravens and the Bengals will take on the Steelers. So all four AFC North teams are playing here. Should be a fun and exciting day of football. We're going to do it the same format that we usually do for Thursday nights, where we're not going to have a set number of start, sit, sleepers, and busts like we would do for our regular Sunday and Monday show. We'll just have the same format, just with two games. So kind of a little bit more to choose from here. And that's how we're going to do it. So, without further ado, to kick off the final week of the regular season, go ahead and give me any starts that you have in these two matchups.
Yeah, so I have Mark Andrews as my first start. I think he has touchdown the last six games now up to this point. I mean, he's been the leading wide receiver, or I guess second behind Zay Flowers. It's kind of back and forth between those two. But right now, this division is not locked up. Baltimore can win this division with a win here against the Browns or a Pittsburgh loss, either or, to clinch that number three seed and get the division title. And I think Mark Andrews can be a part of it, a big part of it, especially against the Browns defense, who's allowed 24 passing touchdowns, only four interceptions, 3,600, almost 3,700 yards through the air given up. I mean, they just haven't been good this year defensively through the air. Now, run defense has been solid, but Mark Andrews, like I said, he's going to be a big part of it. He's been a part of the last couple of weeks. Lamar is still also playing for that MVP against Josh Allen, so he's going to want to put up another big week. Like last week, he had like 300 something yards or 400 something combined yards with his rushing, five passing touchdowns and interceptions. He's going to keep on wanting to push him towards that. And then next up, we go with Najee. Najee is one of the top run defenses in Kansas City. Still put up over 70 rushing yards. Had, I want to say, one or two receptions in that game. He's going to be solid this week, especially for a Steelers defense or Steelers offense and Steelers team that's trying to go out and win a title or a division title and make the playoffs. They have to win, and they also need Baltimore to lose. So it's one of those things that who knows what's going to happen, especially because they'll already know by that point. Steelers playing at 5 o'clock and the Ravens playing at 1:30. They kind of know what happens, but I mean, he's gonna be a big part of this offense, especially if Baltimore does lose. I mean, it's a divisional game; you never know. Yeah, it's the Browns late in the season with Dorian Thompson-Robinson starting, but who knows? I mean, it's an interdivisional game. It's hard to win two interdivisional games against the same opponent in the same season. It's difficult in every division to do that. But the Bengals rush defense hasn't been good this year. They've been middle of the pack, allowing just over 2,000 yards, but 19 rushing touchdowns. I know Warren also had a good game there, but Najee's that number one running back. I believe Najee and Warren are both going to be free agents this year. I think Warren's a restricted free agent, and Najee's just a normal free agent coming into this year. And Najee's going to want to show that he can keep on being productive. I mean, he's had 1,000 yards rushing every single season up to this point. He's averaging, I want to say, 1,300 yards and like 8 total touchdowns every single season. So you're not going to get out of him, and he's trying to play for that contract. If he's able to go out and have an even better season this year, he'll probably not as good as rookie season. Rookie season was pretty good, but a better season than he did the last couple of years, and keep on staying at that 1,000 yard pace for every season. He's playing for a new opportunity because it doesn't seem like he's going to come back to the Steelers. Steelers don't really want him back, it seems like. So he's playing for that opportunity, but especially if the Ravens do lose, he's going to be a big part of that game because the Bengals, they're going to want to slow down that offense. And the way you slow down the offense is having a good running game on the other side to kind of just keep running that clock down because we've seen what Joe Burrow can do and how quickly they can go score. They're going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to slow the game down so Burrow doesn't have as many opportunities.
So I have three starts. The first is going to be kind of an asterisk start. It's going to be Jerome Ford. Obviously, Nick Chubb broke his foot. I believe it was against Kansas City. But anyways, his first game, being back as a lead, back once again against Cincinnati on the road, 11 carries, 92 yards, and a score, and then 5 catches for 39 yards for 24.1 fantasy points. I know last week for fantasy managers, he laid an egg, 6 carries, 22 yards, but you also got to remember that he did have an ankle injury. So fantasy managers did know that going into it, and the ankle injury that he re injured again during that game. So Jerome Ford's kind of an interesting piece here where typically I don't trust, running backs in general that are injured, especially a guy like Jerome Ford, but he's shown productivity as a lead back. Even when Nick Chubb got hurt there against Kansas City, 7 carries, 84 yards, and a score. I mean, this is a guy that can easily run through the hole and have good success. On top of that, a little bit questionable quarterback play with Dorian Thompson-Robinson if they are starting him once again. So I think the biggest thing is, yes, there is a lot of risk with Jerome Ford, but Jerome Ford typically in the lead starting role when he has a bad week doesn't have the same bad week twice. So I think your odds are better, but you would probably start this if you are kind of low in the running back position, or if guys are sitting out and you don't have very many options. I think it's a safe play. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a tremendous one, but one that definitely can have the potential to be great. Secondly, sticking with the Browns, I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. I think this is an obvious one, but I know some people are a little bit concerned starting Jerry Jeudy just because that Browns offense is just so bad. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, however, did target Jerry Jeudy a staggering 18 times last week. 18 targets in the NFL is absolutely unreal. He had the 12 catches for 94 yards, 21.4 fantasy points. Jerry Jeudy on the year has 4 touchdowns and is the 11th position ranked wide receiver, which is just absolutely insane thinking about that wide receivers typically have anywhere from 10 to 12, touchdowns and are considered, a top 4, top 3 even wide receiver. So Jerry Jeudy with 4 touchdowns on the year is the 11th position ranked wide receiver, which is a low end wide receiver one. And I don't think many people, including myself, would have expected that. Jerry Jeudy is going to get targeted, and he's going to get targeted a lot. Sure, will he maybe get in the end zone? Maybe not. But if he gets in the end zone, we've already seen what he can do, and he gets targeted a lot, and he has tremendous yards downfield. At Denver, 9 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown equated to 40.5 fantasy points back in week 13. So that potential is there. He had the one down week before against Cincinnati, 2 catches for 20 yards, but the entire passing game was a little bit upheld as well. So I do like Jerry Jeudy, even going on the road against Baltimore. DTR or whoever their quarterback is going to be in Week 18 will find a way to get him the ball. And finally, I'm going to go with Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson's a guy that I've never really know where to rank. I don't think many people were expecting him to kind of retake that role when Justin Fields started the year, but Russell Wilson has kind of done a good job of fitting himself back into being an average quarterback. He's not going to win you a league, don't get me wrong, but he's still got the potential to at least do it by, having 205 yards last week, 6 carries, 55 yards, and a score. He also, it was the first game in 6 weeks where he hadn't thrown a touchdown. I think there was a perfect opportunity for him to do that. Cincinnati plays in a log of dogfights just because their offense has been so good, and I think this could be another one of those potential games. I think Russell Wilson will get his wide receivers involved. And there's also been a period of time where he hasn't been able to get them involved because Pickens, their top receiver, has been out with injury. So I think passing wise, Russell Wilson's going to be fine. I think he adds some rushing value, especially playing at home against Cincinnati, where this has the potential to be a high scoring game with playoff seeding and implications. What about Sits?
Sorry, I was muted again. So my first sit, I have Khalil Herbert. A lot of people I think are picking him up because Chase Brown was not seen at practice today. He skipped walkthroughs, wasn't there, probably just getting rehab. But one of the things with Khalil Herbert is we saw him play a good amount. We saw him play overtime. We saw him get some production. But 4 carries, 23 yards, almost 6 yards carry, not bad. But he's going against the Steelers defense that's really playing for something here. They've only allowed just over 1,600 rushing yards, only 14 rushing touchdowns up to this point. I mean, this is a team that's really playing for something and has been great in the run defense all year. Khalil Herbert being the backup there, I don't know how much they're really going to trust him with the ball in his hands. Granted, I don't think that the Bengals can get in. I think they are eliminated up to this point. I think there maybe is an outside chance that they can get in with them winning and someone with someone else, a couple other teams losing
They
with
need a
Denver.
they need a win, and like Miami and
Yeah,
Denver both need to
yeah,
lose,
they
so
need
they
to
have the
lose.
lowest of chances.
Yeah, so like I'm not saying they're out of it, but like whose hands are they going to trust in? Potential MVP Joe Burrow, who leads the league in passing yards, passing touchdowns. Jamar Chase having right now the triple crown: touchdowns, receptions, and receiving yards in the NFL. Are they going to trust those guys or Khalil Herbert, the backup, who has less than 300 yards on the season up to this point. I don't think Herbert's going to be a big part of this offense. Yes, he'll still be in there and have some production, but I wouldn't slot him in and be like, oh, look what Chase Brown did. I mean, Chase Brown, since week 9, week 10 or something, has been the number 1 running back in fantasy, or number 2 running back in fantasy, because he was at like 400 yards going up to that point, and since then he's passed over 1,000 yards, has over 10 total touchdowns. He's been great this year, and I don't think we're going to see that out of Khalil Herbert out against one of the top defenses, especially coming off a short week.
So for me, I have two sits. The first is going to be Zay Flowers. Now, Zay Flowers for me has been a hard guy to rank week in and week out because you don't know what you're going to get from Zay Flowers. You're going to get the weeks where you get 5 catches for 127, 2 touchdowns, 29.7 points. Then the following week, you're going to get the weeks where you have 4 catches for 34 yards, and that seems to be what it was, at least in the early part of the year. In the last 5, 6 weeks, he hasn't had more than 15.3 points. He's a guy that gets a lot of value from deep passing from Lamar. But there's also another component to Zay Flowers, which is Lamar really not being the biggest of passers a lot of times. Lamar last week only had 10 completions. He was 10 for 15, which is not a lot of opportunity for wide receivers to get targets. On top of that, he loves throwing to his tight ends, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. So Zay Flowers kind of gets kicked to the curb a little bit. I feel like Zay Flowers doesn't get his production from receptions. He gets his production rather from yards and touchdowns. And if that's not happening, he's not going to be a productive wide receiver. On top of that, the Ravens, obviously going into this matchup, I believe they hold a 1-game lead. Like I know, obviously, they are winning the division right now. Yeah, they're 11-5. The Steelers are 10-6. So playing that first game, they have a lot of opportunities to win that division. But they're also playing the Browns at home. The Browns are not very good. They're competing for the number 1 pick right now. So there's a good chance that the Ravens get out to an early lead and they sit their starters. I mean, I would probably do it if I know that I'm going to win. At least bench them for a period of time because the 1 seed's already gone to Kansas City. So Lamar and the Ravens are going to have to play next week. You want at least a little bit of rest going into that first round of playoffs. So I think there is a potential for this passing game to be, I wouldn't say ineffective, but unreliable, especially in the fantasy championships, especially for a guy like Zay Flowers, who week in and week out, I never really know what I'm going to get. And secondly, I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki has been pretty quiet. He's had a couple big weeks, but last week, by far the most targets. He had 12 targets, so 10 receptions, 86 yards in the day for 18.6 fantasy points. That Bengals offense obviously exploded. Those three: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki. On the road for the Bengals, it's going to be hard for them to, I guess, have sustained success, moving forward, just because the Bengals are a team that really are a good team, but also sometimes can be hit or miss. And I think if any production is going to come from the Bengals passing game, it's going to be just from Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think last week was a little bit of an outlier. And as part of that, especially with Eric All going down, the tight end position has been a bit spotty for Cincinnati this season. And I just don't trust Mike Gesicki to have the same success that he's had in last week, especially in these fantasy championships down the line. What about sleepers? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I am forgetting that I'm muted.
Hey, it's like me. I always forget that I'm on mute.
Yeah. So Pat Fryermuth is who I was saying. He's the leading wide receiver last week against Kansas City. He was also the first game George Pickens was back from injury, but he had 7 receptions for 60 yards, going against a pretty bad defense through the air. I mean, Bengals bottom third of the NFL up to this point. They've allowed 3,868 passing yards up to this point, 29 passing touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Yeah, the Steelers really playing for something here. So with the Bengals, say this was going to be a decently high scoring game. I would say someone like that last week of Broncos and Bengals, like how it was. I wouldn't be surprised if it was very similar to something like that. But Pat, he's going to be a big part of that. The linebacking group there for the Bengals isn't great in pass defense either, which is most likely going to be lined up against Pat Fryermuth. And secondly, I'm going to go with Rashad Bateman. Bateman, one of those guys that he's been quiet throughout this entire year for the most part, but he's had big games here and there. With things Zay Flowers, I wouldn't say he's going to get locked up, but he's also one of those guys that, like you're saying, if the game kind of gets out of hand pretty early, that could be someone they bench, just keep him healthy. Same with Lamar, but Bateman's one of those guys that he's quietly had almost 700 yards this year, 680 on 40 receptions, 8 touchdowns. which is the most touchdowns he's had in his entire career. He has 12 total touchdowns. He has 8 this year. I wouldn't be too surprised if we find him in the end zone this year or this week. He's going against a team in the Browns that isn't great defensively through the air. I've already said their stats. Well, almost 3,700 yards, 24 touchdowns, only 4 picks. A team that doesn't really get turnovers. Bateman be one of those guys who will probably play all game if it does get out of hand pretty early. And if that is what happens, then he will be the number one option on that field with whoever comes in as the backup.
So for me, I only have one sleeper, and it's going to be Mark Andrews. And I don't really care. I know Mark Andrews is the sixth position ranked tight end, but I'm still classifying him as a sleeper just because he had such a bad start to the front half of the year. But he's really turned it on as of late. On top of that, he has a touchdown in each of his last 5 games, seven in his last nine. So he's been effective from that perspective. And he doesn't get necessarily the highest of receptions like he did in his past. He still, gets the, anywhere from 3 to 6 typically. And the 30 to 60 yards. But I think he's a reliable option now. Obviously, at the beginning part of the season, I would have said that he's not a reliable option, but he's really done a good job and has really kind of helped Lamar Jackson, kind of cement his MVP status. I still think Lamar's the MVP favorite, or at least should be. I think the only reason why that he's not is because of voter fatigue. But that's obviously a different topic for some time later. But Lamar's done a great job this season. As I mentioned with Zay Flowers, he loves throwing to his tight ends. And I think, Mark Andrews is, a touchdown his last 5 games. That's hard to do and get consistency from the tight end position. I think there's perfect opportunity for that. On top of that, Derrick Henry in the running game has been so dominant recently that, when you do throw and have an effective running game, a lot of the value goes to tight end. So I think, Mark Andrews is obviously a must start now, but I think a lot of people are still kind of sleeping on him just because of the early aspect in the beginning part of the season where he wasn't as established that we remember Mark Andrews from the past and moving forward there. But I think he's poised for a big week this week. All right, what about any busts?
So I don't have one bust. I kind of have a group, and it's the entire RB room for the Browns. Going against the top run defense this week in the Ravens, just getting just over 1,300 total yards on 12 rushing touchdowns up to this point. There's no one running back you can look at and be like, yeah, I'm confident in starting him. Jerome Ford had only 6 carries, 22 yards last week. Pierce Strong Jr., 5 rush attempts for 33 yards. Deonta Foreman was the top running back there, 13 carries for 49 yards. Yeah, as a total of, say, if Ford or Pierce Strong or Foreman had all those carries and you total up all those yards, like, yeah, be super confident starting him this next week just because you know that he had a majority of the carries. But Foreman, I mean, not coming out of nowhere, but we've seen Jerome Ford, be the lead back. We saw him the second most carries, but least amount of yards out of the running back. Pierce Strong's been more of that third down running back that we've seen him not get so off carries, but he averaged 6.6 yards per carry, so we could see him get some more rush attempts like how he did last week just because he was very productive. And like I said, Foreman led the way in the carries and yards over Ford, who we saw as the main running back the last couple weeks. I would just stay away from the entire room, especially, like I said, going against one of the top run defenses. I don't care if they go out and sit Lamar or they go sit guys on the offense side. They still are probably going to keep all those defensive guys out there, like Roquan, like Kyle Hamilton. We see it every week in blowout games. Those defenses take pride in not allowing points, especially in divisional games. In a game that there's a good chance that or that probably will be the Browns playing from behind, they're not going to be running as much. And I wouldn't be confident really any of these running backs in the receiving game. Pierre Strong led the way, 3 catches, 15 yards last week. Outside that, Foreman had a target or two, but no receptions. We didn't see Jerome Ford have a single reception, even though he's a decent receiving back. We didn't see any of that last week. So I just stay away from the entire room. Great run defense they're facing, and like I said, the carries were just all split last week. There's no number one running back in that room right now.
So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and go and say the Bengals running backs collectively, but more so Chase Brown. Obviously, he is injured. There isn't, for sure clear cut answer, at least early in the week, whether he's going to play or not. I know, the offensive coordinator, Dan Pitcher, said that he's hopeful that he'll be available. I mean, to be fair, this is not like one of those games where the Bengals can start their starter or sit their starters. Like, they need to win and have some help to make the postseason. So with Chase Brown, the season that he's had, I think there's an opportunity for him to be playing. But even that, I mean, he's going to be dealing with that injury. It's just not going to be efficient, effective. And The Bengals running game has been a little bit dismal, especially last week. I mean, 20 carries, 67 yards. It's not necessarily his fault. It's really just the fault of the offensive line. He is a good PPR back, so he's going to get you some value there. But even if he is playing, I don't think he's necessarily a start. I know he's been so dominant, but this could be a week where he gets injured again, or if they realize that they're out of it. There's not even a point to them playing. Like there could be a lot of different things that they wouldn't want to hurt him or have that production hinder anymore. Top back Khalil Herbert, if he is the go-to back, I don't think they utilize him as well as they did Chase Brown. And I think they would be more of a running back by committee team. So I would just try to shy away from the Bengals running backs really as much as possible. So quickly, do you have a winner in the Browns Ravens game? You're on mute. You're on mute. I swear, AJ, because we have this like video podcast, like if you can see him, it's like he doesn't see. Can you hear me when I say you're on mute, or is it go like,
No, I can hear you.
and you're just like, oh, I'm not. Oh, well, I am on mute. Okay, so who do you have winning Browns Ravens?
Ravens, I think it's going to be pretty much blowout. Browns, they want to secure one of those top spots. I think they're going to draft a quarterback this year, have him sit for a year behind Sean, just because they got to keep him for
Which
at
is
least one more
terrible.
year. Yeah, I think that they got to keep him for one more year because the amount of dead money that they're going to have to give him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's the easy one there. I think they're going to draft their quarterback and have him sit for a year if it's Cam Ward or if it's Shadur, one of those two. And then same thing for on the other side. I'm actually going to go with the Bengals winning it. I think Joe Burrow pulls it off. I also just kind of want to see it and have all that tension going into the week with how much it's really going to matter, that Denver game, how much that's going to really matter, how much that Miami game is really going to matter. I think it's just going to be fun. It's just going to be more entertaining if the Bengals win, especially if Joe Burrow does get into the playoffs. I mean, we've seen what he's able to do once he's in the playoffs. And then if he is in the playoffs, voters can't deny him. They can't be like, oh,
Yeah,
well, he didn't make the playoffs. He's not a playoff
right.
team. It's like, well, he just had one of the worst potential chances to get into the playoffs 4 or 5 weeks ago. And look what he did. He wheeled his team into the playoffs. So I think it would just be fun if the Bengals win.
I agree. I'm going to go with the Ravens winning this game. The Browns are just too depleted. They're playing for nothing, and there's kind of a logjam in that final like 7, 8 top pick spot. So I think the Browns, Browns fans for sure just want to lose to get the highest draft pick possible and utilize that pick, whether it's to draft a quarterback, add some pieces to that line, whatever it is, have the control of their own destiny and not sit at the 8 or 9 spot, kind of just waiting to see how the draft goes or trading their draft assets to get, a guy, and especially with the quarterback class being so uncertain like it is this year. I think the Ravens win this game pretty easily. I think they end up, kind of sitting their starters, maybe even early second half, honestly. And then same thing with you. I'm going to go with the Bengals beating the Steelers. I just am always betting against the Steelers, but I think the Bengals are really hot. Joe Burrow is really going to kind of have, I wouldn't say a career day, but maybe 4 touchdowns. Really kind of beg the question of what the MVP will look like, and really kind of make it some fun on Sunday because obviously the Dolphins, I don't even know how they're still alive with the season they've had, and then the Broncos, they have it all. They control their own destiny going against the Chiefs team that's sitting everybody. So that would be fun to see the Broncos lose that, and the Bengals find a way, or really even the Dolphins for that matter, to find a way into the playoffs. But I think the Bengals do win this one, kind of surprise the Steelers on the road, and potentially have 3 AFC North teams, and I'm sure one of those matchups is gonna be an AFC North battle because the Ravens obviously aren't going to be a 1 seed, so there's going to be 3 of the 6 teams, and you do the math, it's pretty likely that there could be a rematch between the Steelers and the Browns, or the Ravens and the Browns. I mean, the Browns, the Bengals, something like that. It should be fun and exciting, but I think the Bengals have the lowest chance to make the playoffs, but I think we'll have the best chance to make the playoffs after we conclude on Sunday. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, follow The Truth on Twitter, The Truth Has One, to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, it raises your energy level, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp to focus memory? Look no further than acid rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Blended Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity while also maintaining ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, one who loved the most now, Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.